UConn. Vanna, do we have to talk about UConn? I think we have to talk about UConn here.
Of course, we're going to talk about it.
0-3 in the Maui. You know what? I want your take on this because here's my biggest.
I text you my take on that.
Here's my biggest overarching takeaway. Right, they went to Maui and they were found out by Memphis in the first game, and because they had 3 games in 3 days, they didn't have a chance to go get into practice work on some of the things that were going wrong and work on some of the things that weren't working. Colorado exposed them because Tad Boyle's a good coach. And then Anthony Grant exposed them because he's a good coach. That was a bad matchup. And UConn just kind of you could see the human element.
Hold on. They got thumped by Dayton.
Yes, they got thumped by Dayton. And you could see just the spirit drain out. That there wasn't the fight that you would see out of a normal UConn team. They Indiana'd it a little bit there. And
I won 2 games in Maui.
Yes. I think Dayton's actually a really good team, by the way. But I think that some of this is a result of they played 4 sub 340 teams heading into this event.
Yeah.
You could see some of the issues that they had if you watched those games. But because they were playing such poor competition, they were able to just kind of beat up on them because of their overwhelming talent advantage. I think that should be a learning curve. I understand why the staff scheduled that way. I think in hindsight, they probably regret scheduling that way. They could have gotten some of these things out there and maybe worked on before they got to Maui. And I think that that's something that should be a learning curve for a lot of coaches and a lot of teams.
I thought they got exposed. And not only did they get exposed, I thought, love Dan, love him. One of my favorite guys, one of the best guys ever off the floor. I thought he embarrassed himself in Maui. There's no other way to put it. I thought he embarrassed himself. I was shocked that Andrea didn't run out on the floor and be like, hey, dude, get your shit together. That's how bad it was. Another thing that was a little bit befuddling to me before I even get to the play was, we have no respect after winning 2 national championships from officiating. Do you want them to change the rules for you because you had success? What do you mean by that?
I think he does.
But see, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And I tell you, it's a whole lot easier to beat up on teams when you got Donovan Clingan at the 5 spot and Adamas a no-go. Be a hell of a coach, but there's still an element of Jims and Joes to this. And those guys there's just not. Where's Andre Jackson? Where's Tristan Newton? Where's Donovan Clingan? Terrace Reed's a good college player, not Donovan Clingan. Aiden Mahaney, good, fine college player, hasn't been great so far. Not Tristan Newton. He's not Cam Spencer. I just thought one is the Memphis thing was impressive for Memphis. There was a lot of tough shot making. And I felt like whenever they won that game or whenever Memphis won that game, it took some air out of UConn. And then they played Colorado, who schemed them really well. And then Colorado ends up with a win. And then by the time they got to Dayton, Hurley's about to kill everybody. And then they get to Dayton and Dayton beats the brakes off of them. So I'm a little bit alarmed, with how all of that's been handled. What really should have happened was, hey man, I lost my cool. I'm a naturally emotional guy. You guys have known this about me, but I need to rein it in a little bit. I need to maintain my edge without going to the same extent that I did down in Maui. Now it's about them rebounding. And guys, they're going to play Baylor at home, and they're probably going to look really good. And they're going to be at home, and they're going to probably win. And it's going to be like it's going to be like this never happened. Well, we just got hosed in Maui. No, you showed your ass in Maui, and it wasn't. It's just a disappointing sequence of events for them. And I also think, while we've all had them in the top 3 of the country coming into the season, this is a top 20 team. And Rob called that. Rob, you called that. And I think that was very accurate because there is an element of hey, we have a great coach, but there's also an element of, what, Kim Spencer ain't walking through those doors. Tristan Newton ain't walking through those doors.
Yeah, the size of the backcourt is a big issue with the way that Dan wants to play. And I do think that I know he kind of identifies as we do nothing but play tough physical, aggressive man-to-man. That's who we are. That's what we are as a team. That's what we are as a program, and that's how we're going to do it. Like, you got a bunch of long, rangy athletes that aren't great at staying in front of people. Like, I think you got to kind of buy into this idea of we're going to throw 1-3-1s at you. We're going to throw some triangle and twos at you. Sometimes you're going to see a 2-3 zone. Sometimes it's going to be a matchup zone. Sometimes that zone is going to turn into man by the end of a possession. Sometimes you're going to get 1-2-2 3/4 courts. Sometimes that 1-2-2 is going to turn into an aggressive trap in the backcourt. Like, take advantage of the length and athleticism you got and the depth, and just let these guys kind of run around a bit and try to force turnovers. And then you don't have to play against a set defense as much. You'll be able to get some more layups in transition. I think there's going to be a little bit of an identity change of who this UConn team is, because I'll be honest, man, I don't see any way that you could be a good defensive team when you have a backcourt that's Hassan Diarra, Aiden Mahaney, and Solo Ball. None of those guys can stay in front of anybody right now. And Solo is the one that's concerning to me, because he's a top 1% athlete. He's got to be better. You can't get blown by the way that he's getting blown by. Like, you are too long, too strong, too athletic, and too good. That's a want to one for me. So that's my rant.
What you got, John?
I think Dan Hurley's the best thing going in college basketball.
Absolutely. And I agree with that.
We're all talking about him. Everybody's talking about him, and everybody is going to talk about him one way or the other. He feels slighted. He feels short as part of the way that he builds out a season. And this team is not a top 3 team in college basketball, and they did get exposed, particularly on the defensive end of the floor. Defensively, I have never seen a Connecticut team struggle so much under Dan Hurley at getting a stop. And they could not get a stop at certain points in this tournament. They had no time to work on anything. Nobody did. None of those 8 teams did. So that's not really an excuse. It was a perfect storm. Memphis was the better team, deserved to win the game. That game had trickle-down effects. You knew when that game ended, it was going to have trickle-down mental effects. Now, losing to Colorado didn't have that. Look, I do think how we talk about the coach's behavior also needs a little bit of pushback here. We're getting a lot of people. I'm seeing some opinions. Terrence, yours was very measured and very good.
Okay.
But there are some people on some other shows that are comparing Dan's antics to things that go far beyond basketball, and that's just not right.
Yeah.
I mean, he misbehaved with an official. He has done this before. Also, like, throughout the years of college basketball, he's not the first coach, and he certainly won't be the last. So let's pump the brakes here on just, we all have our flaws.
Yeah.
And we all make mistakes. And I think that the guy who's won back-to-back national championships we can cut him some slack here and say, you know what, it was a tough one. And I'm not trying to defend what he did. I'm just saying, like, we get into such definitives on stuff. And he is a fiery character on the sidelines. And he was arguing an over-the-back call, but he was arguing things that he didn't need to argue. That over-the-back call was not a good call.
It was a buildup. Like, you could see it building up. And part of the problem, and Fan, I told you this the other day, part of the problem is that, like, he spent the last 2 years just rolling people over. And now that he's in some dogfights, the first dogfight that he's in where the stress can really get up and it's like, oh, wow, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. Like, I think it all just kind of bubbled up. There were some calls that maybe didn't go his way early in the game. He's got some players fouled out. The Samson Johnson, like the tech that got him kicked out of the game, probably like, it was just a snowball effect. And then that call happens and, like, he loses control, and it is what it is.
That's right.
In terms of, like, can I just add one thing and then I'll let you finish? Like, the criticism, like, I'm not sure who you were referring to there. I will say this. I didn't love that that Gary Parrish compared him to Kanye West, right? I've seen a lot of pushback on that.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
I mean,
And I will say, like,
ridiculous.
That's absolutely ridiculous. And Gary, you're better than that.
Yeah, and what I will say is that if you can get past that comparison, the point that he was making is don't let your problems be bigger than what your great attributes are. And I think that there is a fair point to be made there. I didn't love the Bob Knight comparison either, but, like, I get what Gary was saying, and, like, it was a bad choice of word, guys. You can stop yelling at him for it. Like, I think he knows that he said something that he probably didn't there was a connotation there. That
I love Dan too. I love him. Like, he's one of my favorite guys off the court because he's always. But it's a balancing act for him because like what makes him great is also what makes him like this. But I thought he went over the line this time.
He
but
did. You know what else?
Said, like, it's still about finding that balance.
Yeah, and also, and I'll let you finish. Finn, I've cut you off like 3 different times. I'm sorry, man. But like he is now like the story that cuts through everything, right? Like the college basketball talking point that we got from the feast week. It wasn't that Auburn ran over everybody. It wasn't like the Kansas versus Cooper Flag game in Las Vegas. It wasn't the Players Era Festival. It was Dan Hurley. Like, he has become the presence in college basketball that gives people something to talk about in November. And good, bad, polarizing, whatever you want. Like, if he's going to end up being the villain of this sport, I do think that that's something that is overall good because it gives us a platform to be able to have something to talk about that will resonate with people that are still football fans in November and December. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's great for the sport. It is. I mean, people are going to be mad. You're all talking about him. We're all dedicating time to him because he's won the last 2 national championships. Let's get back to how they're playing.
Mm-hmm.
So, point guard play. They missed on Aiden Mahaney. They just did. Hassan Diarra is solid. He's not Tristan Newton. Nobody is. Mm-hmm. So the other side of this is their biggest pro is their shot making. Mm-hmm. Their perimeter shot making is their best quality. They will have a game this year where they hit 15 3-pointers and they beat a team by 25, and you're going to say, what just happened?
It might be Baylor.
It might be Baylor. And I think they're going to win this game on Wednesday night. They have won 30 consecutive games on campus at Gamble Pavilion, 30 in a row. Their last loss at Gamble was to Xavier. So a couple years ago now. They're so good on campus. That game being on campus is huge. It is huge. UConn will have some time here to prepare. They have to re-identify what they're doing defensively. What they unlocked out of Terrace Reed in the game against Memphis is something that's got to track here going forward. Yep. That guy played in the Big Ten. He played against physical people. He's got to impose his will. The calls some of them were making in Maui are not going to be called in Big East play. They will be called in the NCAA tournament, but things are going to go out the window there in the Big East. We're going to get to the Big East here in a second. But for Connecticut, do I think that they're a top 25-ish team when it's all said and done? Yes, if not top 20. Do I think that they're going to miss the NCAA tournament? I would be stunned. I mean, I really would be stunned. I know Billy Donovan missed it the year after they went back-to-back. This team still has quite a bit of talent. They just didn't have time to work on themselves. And it's good for them that they have the degree of resume opportunities that they have here over the next 3 non-conference games. If I'm a UConn fan, which I am not, Robert is, but I'm not, I would say I cover them closely, and I would say if I'm Connecticut, if you get 2 of the next 3, clean off the plate and go into league play, and you're fine.